Ghouls and Fiends, welcome once again to another edition of the Ministry of Slam.
You hang up on me again, I'll gut you like a fish, understand?
Live on twitch.tv/Tezz, and, at a later point on YouTube and a later point on podcast platforms. Apple Podcasts, your Spotify. That's about it at the moment. How's everyone doing? We all excited for another edition of the Ministry of Horror, for some more horror chat? I've made the absolutely amateur mistake of cracking open a beer and having a swig just before the show starts, so I'm now suppressing a burp, and it is quite difficult, but we will soldier on. Hey Vix in the chat, how's it going? How you doing? Hey Fran as well, hope you're good. Hope you've had a good couple of weeks. So let's do our usual little catch up, and I'll address the elephant in the room in a moment. And if you're listening on audio, you won't know what I mean. But if you're watching live, you may have noticed some things going on behind me, or lack thereof. So first off, we have done a little bit more of gaming streaming, which has been good. Apologies that it hasn't been in this setup. And it hasn't been with decent audio, with this microphone setup, and audio settings generally not being that great. I've been playing Diablo 4 specifically. God damn, I haven't found myself getting addicted to a game in quite a while. Other than the big story games like Last of Us 1 and 2, God of War 2018. I've still got Ragnarok to play. I've tended to buy games when they're on sale and, that's a few quid. That seems to be pretty cheap, give it a go. But when Diablo 4 came out, I thought, I really want to play that, but there's no way in hell I'm paying 70 quid for it, or 60 quid, or even 50 quid. The prices of new games these days, you got to put your foot down somewhere. Unless, I guess, if it's something you really, really want, really, you're a huge fan, whatever, you'll pay the premium. But for 70 quid for a base version of a game, no way, Jose. But then I found a copy of it on eBay for like £32, and I thought, that's fine by me. I've got no problems buying a second-hand game. It came with a bunch of freebies with it as well, so, props to the seller. And it's so fun. It's so good. I know Diablo games have always been very popular. I played 3 a few years ago, but I didn't really play that much of it, but it was fun what I played. It just never really hooked me. Diablo 4 seems to have hooked me, to the point where I'll finish work and go, I'll get a quick hour now, get a quick 45 minutes in, and I haven't had that for years. So that's been a lot of fun. So there's been a couple of those streams, but again, they've just literally been a case of, I'm going to play it anyway, I'm in my living room, and I think, you know what, let's chuck a headset on, let's chuck a headset on, and let's, kind of get this on Twitch, have a little look, see, have a go. Sorry, my phone just went. I will look at that shortly, Vix, because I see that as a message from you. I'll keep an eye on my phone after the show. And so, yeah, I've been playing a bit of that. We've got some reviews coming up later on, one of which I saw in the cinema, so we will discuss that. And we're going to talk about that a bit more when we get there. But what you may have noticed if you are watching this live is that I'm sans artwork behind me. I've still got some artwork on the wall that I need to take down eventually. But I'm sans artwork behind me, and books seem to be rapidly disappearing. I mean, if the camera tilted slightly to my right, you'd see piles of boxes. And that is because the Ministry of Horror, nothing has changed in the Ministry of Horror. Only the location that we will be streaming from. So I am in the process of moving in with my lovely girlfriend, Vix. And she has been brilliantly putting together a office space for me, which will also not just be my work office space, but will double up as Ministry of Horror HQ. So it's good news. The office is changing. It's gonna have some new bells and whistles. And by the time we do the next show, which will be in 2 weeks' time, or if there are any, Any slight delays, then it will only be the following week, but it will be from a new location. So very exciting times. Other than that, I mean, that's kind of me all caught up to date. I hope everyone's doing well. Hope we all enjoyed the last show, the Blair Witch Project discussion. It certainly sent me on another rabbit hole. Whichever film it was that mentioned the connection to the West Memphis Three, Paradise Lost, Damien Eccles. I can't remember how it kind of led on to that, but I ended up looking back into that case again. And I don't know if you're like me, you ever go down a true crime rabbit hole where you'll hear something or you'll see something and go, I'm going to look into that. I mean, Christ, today, Manic Street Preachers, A Design for Life came on this radio station that was playing in the background. So my head instantly went, did they ever solve what happened to the guitarist that disappeared? So I'm then on Wikipedia, I'm looking up, what actually occurred, what went on there. Who knows? It's still a mystery. But yeah, after that show, I ended up then going, have there been any updates since? Have they ever found any new evidence to point to who actually caused these atrocious crimes? But it's a very interesting case, very dark and disturbing, but very interesting. Madness in the Bible Belt of America. So without further ado, I think it's time that we get into some horror news. This is the news. There we go. I think I timed that up a little bit better than last time. Methinks. So, as per usual, all the news for the show comes from bloodydisgusting.com. This is an editorial from John Squires earlier this week. 9 new horror movies releasing this week, including surprises and theatrical offerings. Ooh. So, let's get into this. A24's low-budget horror hit Talk to Me scared up $67 million at the box office, making the film one of A24's top horror hits to date. And the film just hit at-home digital yesterday. You can purchase the film on digital outlets now for $19.99. I will say I checked here in the UK. You can rent it for £15 because I think the release of it was slightly behind here in the UK. I've pre-ordered the Blu-ray. I'm not gonna rent it at the premium price. I think the Blu-ray comes out next month, so I'm regardless of if it's good or if it's excellent, I do want to purchase it. As I've mentioned before, the guys that made the film had a kind of a YouTube channel, or have a YouTube channel called The Raka Raka. These twins from Australia, and for years they've been making content on YouTube, like stunt content, wrestling content, comedy stuff. Really energetic, really talented guys. And so when they then mentioned that they're making a horror film, it was quite exciting. So I thought, okay, I like these guys. They also make horror. That's awesome. And then when it got picked up by A24, it's the cool thing is where they put these things on YouTube, you're almost kind of going along on the journey with them, like kind of vicariously. So I'm very much hyped to watch it. And the fact that the trailers do look pretty good. But I'm not going to spend £15 to watch it once at home. You could argue when I buy films, I probably spend £15 or slightly more to watch it once at home. But then I have the option to watch it again, should I so wish. What I tell myself anyway. But it's supporting the arts at the end of the day. Vote with your wallet. The brutal terror of Talk to Me unfolds when a group of friends discover how to conjure spirits using an embalmed hand. They become hooked on the new thrill until one of them goes too far and unleashes terrifying supernatural forces. Sophia Wilde, Miranda Otto, Alexandra Jensen, Joe Bird, Otis Janji, and Zoe Tarakas star in the A24 horror hit. So I'm excited to watch that. I did want to go and see it in the cinema, but it literally was out here, or at least in the locales of round here or near my girlfriend's for a week. It had such a small cinema run here, which is a real shame, I think. Sony Pictures International Productions and Amazon Prime Video joined forces with Alex de la Iglesias, who did The Day of the Beast, The Last Circus, and Witching and Bitching, on the film series The Fear Collection. The collection includes... Sorry, I think my pooch is asleep because I suddenly heard... Whoop, 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 whoop. I've done it once. Weird. The collection includes Alex de la Iglesias, oh my fucking god, Venetia Frenia, Jam Belagueros, who worked on Rec 2 and Sleep Tight, his film Venus, or their film Venus, I don't know if Jaime is a man or woman, or non-binary, and Paco Plaza, who worked on Rec and Veronica, their La Abuela, and the entire free film collection just surprise released on VOD yesterday. You can digitally buy or rent the 3-film Fear collection on VOD outlets, including Vudu, where you'll find the films either bundled together or in one set or available individually. So that's pretty interesting. Okay, I'm not watching the trailers. Can't be asked. Next, Susanna. Oh no, that's... Wait, what? Right, okay, now that's a continuation. Sorry, the layout where they've got this blurb, but then they've got individual blurbs and breakdowns and trailers for it on their site is just kind of throwing me a bit. Not that I'm critiquing, bloody disgusting. Obviously, they're a great news source. 5 Hispanic filmmakers have come together for the upcoming horror anthology Satanic Hispanics, which dread and iconic events release in select theatres on Thursday. The filmmakers, you ask? The list includes Mike Mendez, who worked on Big Ass Spider, Alejandro Bruges, who worked on Juan of the Dead, Gigi Sol Guerrera, who did Culture Shock, Eduardo Sanchez of the Blair Witch Project, and Demian Rugna, who worked on Terrified, which is very good. Which makes for a killer horror anthology lineup. I'm always down for a good anthology. The great thing with an anthology is if you don't like one of the segments, there's another segment coming up shortly afterwards. So hopefully you like that one. I'm always down for a good anthology. I'm a big fan of the VHS series. I still haven't seen the 3rd one. I don't know why. I've just never got around to watching that. It's never reviewed very well. But the one before the most recent one was very good. The most recent one was all right. It was all right. It was okay. Iconic character Hercule Poirot hits the high seas for a terrifying horror adventure in A Haunting in Venice, a supernatural horror movie from Oscar-winning filmmaker Kenneth Branagh that adapts Agatha Christie's novel Halloween Party. A Haunting in Venice will open in theatres nationwide on Friday, September 15th, today. This is the first horror movie from Branagh since Mary Shelley's Frankenstein back in 1994, grafting a spooky skin onto his critically acclaimed tales of Hercule Poirot. You know, horror is hot when Oscar-winning filmmakers are making horror movies, and it's always exciting to see non-horror franchises dipping their toes into the genre like this. Featuring a screenplay by Oscar nominee Michael Green, who did Logan, A Haunting in Venice was filmed at Pinewood Studios outside London and on location in Venice. I've never seen any of the Hercule Poirot adaptations, whether that's the more recent Kenneth Branagh ones or any sort of prior ones. I think my mum used to like Agatha Christie. I just don't think the sort of, I'm going to assume, period piece setting of those sort of like tea time thrillers, I guess, ever appeal to me. And maybe I'm completely underselling and undermining the series or Agatha Christie, but I'm sure when I was growing up, it used to be that like an Agatha Christie thing would be starring actors from like, I don't know, Heartbeat and Taggart, or no, probably not Taggart. Inspector Morse, that sort of thing. And those are the sort of things my parents would watch, but I was always just sort of look at and go, I probably would actually enjoy them if I sat down and watched them, but I don't know. When you're of an age and there's things that your parents like, you kind of sort of think, I'm not going to watch that shit. And then it's me probably missing out at the end of the day. Anyway, I've heard mixed things about The Haunting in Venice. Whether that's fans of the previous films not liking the horror approach of this one, don't know. Probably won't watch it, I'm going to be honest. As you may recall, next up, a mysterious Netflix movie titled The Count had been rated R for strong violence and gore and graphic nudity. And Blood Disgusting now know the project is from director Pablo Larraín, officially titled El Conde. It comes to Netflix this Friday. El Conde is a dark comedy horror that imagines a parallel universe inspired by the recent history of Chile. The film portrays Augusto Pinochet, a symbol of world fascism, as a vampire who lives hidden in a ruined mansion in the cold southern tip of the continent. Feeding his appetite for evil to sustain his existence, after 250 years of life, Pinochet has decided to stop drinking blood and abandon the privilege of eternal life. He can no longer bear that the world remembers him as a thief. Despite the disappointing and opportunistic nature of his family, he finds new inspiration to continue living a life of vital and counter-revolutionary passion through an unexpected relationship. I mean, it sounds interesting. Looks like it's a black and white film, potentially, from the imagery that I'm seeing on the site. Okay. Interesting. Next up, now this is on Shudder today, I believe. I haven't seen too much about it, but it looks like it could be decent. It is Shudder we are talking about here, which is a real fucking mixed bag. Real mixed bag. I was going to, I should probably mention now, actually, I was going to have a new film for the review section. It's called Perpetrator, or The Perpetrator. It's got Alicia Silverstone in it, who people may remember from mainly Batman and Robin, also Clueless. I turned it off within half an hour because it didn't necessarily seem bad, but it was just really giving me that style over substance sort of appeal. And I thought, you know what, I can't really be asked to spend my evening watching this. So I didn't want to. It's not that it was terrible, but I thought I'm not that interested now in watching this. It's not a case of sticking with it. But either way, that's been another Shudder release recently where the trailers for it looked quite good. And maybe I need to go back to it, and I was just, jumping to conclusions. But that opening half an hour really didn't ingratiate itself with me or enamor me to it. So, based on the online phenomenon of the same name, not aware of it, Rebecca McKendry, who was in Glorious, is playing the Elevator Game with her next movie that comes to Shudder on Friday. Elevator Game follows socially awkward teenager Ryan, who ingratiates himself into a group of recent high school graduates that run an online web series debunking urban myths. But Ryan has a secret. His sister, disappeared months earlier, and he believes they, and a dangerous online challenge called the Elevator Game, were responsible. To play the game, you must ride the elevator in a specific sequence, invoking a supernatural creature called the Fifth Floor Woman. That's a lazy name. In an attempt to gain more information as to the whereabouts of his sister, Ryan persuades the group to play the game once more and risk unleashing the most fearsome consequences imaginable. It sounds interesting enough. There is a trailer. It's Shudder though, so you gotta temper your expectations. I don't recognize any names of the cast, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Okay. I mean, it's on a platform I pay for, so I will check it out at some point, hopefully for a review for the next show. Next, Amandla Stenberg from Bodies, Bodies, Bodies leads the theatrically released horror movie My Animal, which Paramount brings home to digital this Friday, September 15th. My Animal, the feature debut of director Jacqueline Castell, has been rated R for language throughout, sexual content, nudity, some drug use, and violence. Amandla Stenberg stars in the new horror movie alongside Bobby Salvor Moines, Stephen Machati, Heidi von Palesk, Corey Lippman, and Joe Apollonio. Heather, an outcast teenage goalie, longs to play on the hockey team of her small town. She meets and falls in love with the newcomer Johnny, an alluring but tormented figure skater. The relationship blossoms despite Heather's struggles with her alcoholic mother, her hidden sexual orientation, and a familial curse that transforms her into a feral wolf under the full moon. Heather and Johnny's secret tryst soon clashes against the conformity of their small community, exposing dangerous truths and igniting a passionate, violent night of personal transformation. Oh, a werewolf film. Well, that's it for the new horror film releases. Let me know in the chat if any of that tickles your fancy. I mean, the Elevator game, I will probably give it a watch just for the convenience factor. But, you know, other than, I suppose, of course, Talk to Me, which I will wait. I will wait for the home release next month. So we're going now to comic book news. So check out the first issue of the Murkoff Collections, which is a tie-in comic for the Outlast Trials. So video game fans will probably be aware of the Outlast video games. So fans of Red Barrel's The Outlast Trials now have some light reading while they wait on the next update of the early access game. Per comicbook.com, fans can now check out the first issue of the comic book tie-in with the Outlast Trials, the Murkoff Collections. Written by J.T. Petty and illustrated by GMB Chomik Hunk. Is that meant to be like Comic Hunk or something? But it's Chomik Huck. I don't. Maybe that is their legitimate name. I don't know. I don't know. The Outlast Trials, the Murkoff Collections, focuses on Leland Coyle, the former policeman who was enlisted by the Murkoff Corporation as one of the experimental population, or X-Pops. For those who haven't played the game, the X-Pops are failed test subjects of the early stages of the Corporation experiments and are one of the main antagonists in the Outlast Trials. So, I've not played anything of the Outlast Trials. It seems to be in early access at the moment. I couldn't get on with the Outlast games. I played a little bit of the first game. I played a little bit of the second game. But that model of gaming isn't really for me. I'm as much as I like watching a horror film and I like playing some horror games, I suppose I'm more into the survival horror when there's some action, or the action horror. If it's pure survival horror in terms of you've got to try and survive by hiding and running, nah, not for me. Not for me. Because it's just not my thing, not my jam. I don't mind watching like let's plays of it. I find them quite interesting, but yeah. So I mean, I'm really out of the loop with comic books. I will now only recently get the odd trade paperback. I picked up a couple when I went to that big book warehouse. I read through one of the Batman ones recently. It was all right, but I've got a couple of more big ones in that collection to look at. So yeah, I can't say I'll be checking this out personally, but if you're a fan of, well, if you're a comic book fan, horror fan, horror comic book fan, I should say, and also a fan of the Outlast series, then this is good news for you. Checking out the Outlast Trials, the Murkoff Collections. So next up in the horror news, Saw X. Cinemark opens orders for limited Billy the Puppet popcorn buckets. Cinemark has done it again. Hot on the heels of their highly coveted Scream 6 popcorn bucket. I was going to say Scream 4 for a second there. Scream 6 popcorn bucket. The popular theatre chain has announced a new line of merch for Saw X that includes exclusive popcorn buckets. Live or die for popcorn. Make your choice. Saw X arrives in theatres on September 29th. The new movie merch comes close behind the debut of Saw X's AMC commercial parody. Now you can add themed popcorn buckets to your horror movie going experience. You can grab the Billy the Puppet popcorn tub on a link. Oh. Not available in my location. Well, that's not very nice. From the Cinemark site, shipping mid-October to 2023, limited edition Cinemark exclusive, light-up features with a push of a button, watches Jigsaw's sinister red eyes glow. Ooh, very cool. Very, very cool. So in regards to the film, it's set between the events of Saw 1 and 2. A sick and desperate John travels to Mexico for a risky and experimental medical procedure in hopes of a miracle cure for his cancer, only to discover the entire operation is a scam to defraud the most vulnerable. The infamous killer returns to his work, turning the tables on the con artist in his signature visceral way through devious, deranged, and ingenious traps. Shawnee Smith also returns as Amanda in Saw X. I'm certainly more interested to watch Saw X after having done the rewatch of the Saw films for the Saw episode a few shows back. Will it be good? I mean, the trailer looks pretty good. It certainly looks like it's got more of the tone of the first 4 films. So, yeah, that can only be good. It's got to be better than Spiral. Spiral wasn't terrible, but the reveal of the killer I thought was absolutely shite. It was one of those things when the person behind it reveals who they are, and I go, "Oh, fuck off." You know, it just always makes me think Scooby-Doo. It was me all along. Bullshit. I couldn't give a shit. Next up, Christine. John Carpenter shares his thoughts on Brian Fuller's remake. So 2 years ago, it was announced that Stephen King's killer car Christine would be coming back to life with Brian Fuller, man behind Hannibal, directing the new take for Blumhouse and Sony. Of course, original director John Carpenter has thoughts on this, revealed today in an interview with Total Film. Christine is one of 3 Stephen King adaptations turning 40 in 2023, and Total Film spoke with Carpenter and original star Keith Gordon about the film's momentous anniversary in their latest issue. I know there's some rumblings about its anniversary. My question is, why Carpenter cracked when speaking with the publication? Total Film asked his thoughts about Fuller's pending remake, and his answer was surprising. "Oh boy," Carpenter says. "Well, good luck to him. It'll probably be better." Carpenter wasn't the only one who offered encouragement. I think he's really talented and a good person to do it, Gordon told the outlet. I mean, I don't have a negative feeling about people remaking something, especially 40 years later. Christine could be told in a different way and not be an insult to the original. There's a very short list of untouchable classics that should never be remade. Films where their groundbreakingness or idiosyncrasy is what makes them special. I wouldn't want to see anyone's remake of Citizen Kane or 2001 or Raging Bull. It was previously reported that Fuller is getting under the hood with the intention to keep it in an 80s time period and grounded in King's bestseller. Producers for the remake include Jason Blum, Vincenzo Natali, and Stephen Hoban. The 1983 original was directed by John Carpenter about a shy teen, played by Arnie Cunningham. Oh, no, the shy teen was Arnie Cunningham, who comes out of his shell after he buys a 58 Plymouth Fury to fix up. The car has a mind of its own, as well as murderous past, and begins to change the young man and everyone around him in most dangerous fashion. While it's been 2 years since the remake's initial announcement and production has yet to begin, it's nice to know that Carpenter and Star Gordon have faith in Fuller's take on the material. So I enjoy Christine. I mean, it's Stephen King adaptation. Tick. It's John Carpenter. Tick. It's got a banging soundtrack by Carpenter. Tick. It's really good. And when this got announced, I was pretty hyped because Brian Fuller is a great director, and Hannibal is one of the best TV shows. It was so much better than it had any right to be. You know, when you hear that there's a TV adaptation of, well, I mean, it's novels initially, but you think Hannibal, you think Silence of the Lambs, or maybe to a lesser extent Hannibal, but also Red Dragon. And when there's like TV adaptations or TV expansions in the universe or films, you tend to think, oh God, is it really going to be all that in a bag of potato chips? But Hannibal was so much better than it had any right to be. And I think, you know, along with a number of fans, I still pine for some streaming outlet to come along and pick up Series 4 one day, maybe. I know all the stars that still want to be involved. But yeah, a Christine remake. Interested. I'll keep an eye out for that. So next up, first look at home invasion horror Last Straw, heading to Sitges and Beyond Fest. Blood Disgusting has a first image from the horror thriller Last Straw, which will world premiere at the Sitges Film Festival before making its way to Beyond Fest next month. Variety reports Bluefinch Films has boarded worldwide sales. Written by Taylor Sardoni, Last Straw pays homage to the pressure cooker genre films of the past and aims to present a raw and unrelenting twist on the home invasion thriller. The story revolves around a young waitress working the late shift alone at a rural roadside diner. Her life takes a terrifying turn when she becomes the target of a group of masked assailants. As the night unfolds, she must muster all her strength to survive. The film marks the directorial debut of Alan Scott Neal, and the cast includes Jessica Belkin, Jeremy Sisto, and Taylor Kowalski. That's a talented cast. Jeremy Sisto, Wrong Turn, May. May is an incredible film he is in. Jessica Belkin, American Horror Story. I do vaguely recognize her, but I wouldn't say I recognize her from American Horror Story necessarily. And I don't know Taylor Kowalski, who was in Snowfall. I'm not familiar with Snowfall. But a new home invasion horror, worth a boot. And then finally for the news, The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon. You can now watch the first episode online for free right now. The next spin-off show from the world of The Walking Dead is AMC's The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon, which premiered earlier this week on AMC and AMC Plus. If you don't have either, there's good news. The premiere episode is available to watch online right now. The upcoming spin-off series tracks Daryl Dixon's journey across a broken but resilient France as he hopes to find a way back home. As he makes the journey, though, the connections he forms along the way complicates his ultimate plan. Check out the premiere episode online, in which Daryl Dixon's arrival to France sets off a violent chain of events that inadvertently puts a young boy at the heart of a growing religious movement in danger. Daryl agrees to help shepherd the boy to safety in exchange for help returning to America. Based on previous plot descriptions, expect to see a lot of stunning set pieces ahead in this offshoot series. Set after the series conclusion of The Walking Dead, the readers-led offshoot finds the zombie apocalypse fan favourite transported across the Atlantic to France and a whole new level of a world gone mad. Posey will play the female lead Isabel, a member of a progressive religious group who joined forces with Daryl on a journey across France and finds herself confronting her dark past in Paris. Negatis portrays Quinn, a displaced Brit who has become powerful in post-apocalyptic Paris as a black marketeer and the owner of the Demimonde, a sexy underground nightclub. There has been a part of me on-off that has thought about returning to The Walking Dead. Not starting it again because, that's a lot of TV to catch up on. That, or to rewatch, I should say. Especially as it become more and more 16 to 20 episode seasons, as opposed to the first season, which I'm pretty sure was 6 episodes. I'm not going to complain too much about that because I am still doing my rewatch of Criminal Minds. I'm now at series 11. But it is an episode here and there, like once a week, maybe twice a week. But when the episodes, there's like 22 episodes, 24 episodes a season, it takes a while. But part of me has thought, should I jump back into roundabout where I jumped off The Walking Dead, and just kind of see it through? Because apparently it does start getting a bit better near the end, maybe, sort of. I don't know. There's too many things at the moment, and too many things kind of going on that it's just, do I have time to jump back into a show that I'd stopped watching because I got incredibly bored with it? Probably not. Let's be realistic. So do I have any interest in watching an offshoot with the Daryl Dixon character? Not really, personally. He was a cool character in terms of his appearance and his kind of fighting style on the show. But when I'd heard about Andrew Lincoln leaving and Norman Reedus was then going to become the show lead, and I'd stopped watching the show a season or so before this, I remember kind of thinking, Daryl Dixon's cool. Is he lead character in a show cool, though? I don't know. Some people who continued watching the show would have to tell me. I certainly have my doubts. So a whole show around the character, maybe. Who knows? But anyway, guys and gals, ghouls and fiends, that is it for the horror news. Oh. That was the news. Boom. I need to find a way to fade that out, make it a nicer transition. So, I watched a couple of new horror films in the last 2 weeks. And both of them weren't bad. Is that not a bit shock horror considering the films I watched on the last show, Vampire and Bad Things, were both kind of shit? We start off with Cobweb. Cobweb, which, when it was announced, had some very good trailers for it. Made it look incredibly creepy. But I don't know about stateside, but over here in the UK, it got limited exposure. It seemed to get released here much later than the American release. It was released stateside on July 21st, 2023. Does it have on here the UK release date? Because I'm sure that was only very recently. I'm sure it was maybe start of September, if not end of August. So that's a little bit strange. But Cobweb's a 2023 American horror thriller film directed by Samuel Bowden in his directorial debut. Its screenplay, written by Chris Thomas Devlin, was included in the 2018 The Blacklist. What is The Blacklist? Is an annual survey of the most liked motion picture screenplays not yet produced. It's been published every year since 2005 on the second Friday of December by Franklin Leonard, a development executive who subsequently worked at Universal Pictures. Oh, interesting. The film stars Lizzie Kaplan, Woody Norman, Cleopatra Coleman, and Anthony Starr, who people may know as Homelander. It had a limited theatrical release in the United States by Lionsgate on July 21st, 2023. So, in this film, Peter is a shy, frequently bullied 8-year-old boy living with his overbearing yet emotionally distant parents, Carol and Mark. One day at school, Peter elects to stay inside during recess and earn some sympathy from his substitute teacher, Miss Devine. Despite having plans to go trick-or-treating on Halloween night, his parents forbid him due to the disappearance of a young girl several years ago. Later that night, Peter is awoken to the sound of tapping outside his bedroom window. His parents deny these occurrences, insisting that he is imagining them. Over the next few days, Peter talks to the voice, who he learns is named Sarah. She claims that she was trapped in the walls by Peter's parents and calls them evil, leaving Peter disturbed. So that is kind of the initial setup for this film. This kid is starting to distrust his parents. The imagery of this is all very creepy. It's set around Halloween, so you've got all the autumnal weather, pumpkins everywhere. The presentation of the house, they've also got a pumpkin patch in their garden, which is all very good. Like the aesthetics of this, the mise en scene, the set dressing is very, very well done. But we're setting into this world where our protagonist is this kid, and his parents seem to care for him. But there's also just this kind of strangeness. There's like and I guess you'd have a reluctance to entertain when your kid says there's someone in the walls. You'd think, okay, kids have got crazy imaginations. But then there's quite a few little creepy moments that appear that they could be dream sequences, or they could be, did that actually happen? Maybe. Involving what actually are his parents. Potentially. As he gets closer and closer to this person in the wall, it then starts kind of influencing him. The moment where he decides to fight back against a bully and it goes disastrously wrong. It goes kind of from one extreme. Well, it goes from one intention, which is probably a poor intention to begin with anyway, to an extreme result. And he seems to be kind of getting negatively influenced, or his good nature being infected potentially. But then at the same point, when you're hearing about these stories that the person in the wall is telling Peter about his parents, that's then going to change your perception a bit to, well, actually, this person's trying to help Peter. And for the first 2/3 of the film, that is essentially kind of the general setup. It does go kind of crazy in the third act. Not necessarily to a negative. I would say. But it was one of those things where when we get into the third act and the shit hits the fan and things get quite violent or inferred violence, shall we say, it's done tastefully, but the implication is fucking violent. There are some kind of jumps as to, for me at least, I had to kind of go, well, what exactly is going on? Like, I thought this was this going this way, and it's taken my ideas, and that's no bad thing at all for a film to lead you one way and then flip it on its head. That's a mark of a good film. But I think it was in the execution of what was occurring, and I'm being vague, I don't want to give any spoilers away, that I had to kind of take a step back and go, so was that actually what I thought it was? Again, being kind of vague, I did end up going on Reddit afterwards just to gauge if other reactions or other interpretations, I should say, were similar to mine, in which they were. But I will say that again, I am being incredibly vague, but essentially in the third act of the film, when the shit does hit the fan, there are moments where, and this of course is a horror film, you need to step away from any sort of preconceptions of how plausible things are. Again, if you take it on the basis of this isn't in a, let's say for example, isn't in a supernatural world, then you'd expect there to be certain laws that are followed, or to certain, restrictions of abilities perhaps. But they kind of get thrown to the wayside, I guess, slightly for the visual treat there. And I guess those visuals later on are fairly, I guess, reminiscent of Mama. And when I say Mama, I mean first half of Mama, not Mama when you see too much of Mama and go, oh god, the CGI is a bit ropey on this. Mama when it's more the hair. So if you're watching live, you can see the artwork on screen. The hair plays a big part in the film later on. But I think I've been as vague as I can be without getting to the point of saying a lot of nothing. In general, this was a... Oh, I've had a smart detection. Someone wanting promotion and bots. No, thank you. I don't know if that's appeared on the screen, but it's had a little... I've had a pop-up asking of me if I want to allow or deny a post. No, thank you, but I appreciate the drop by. So in regards to did I enjoy this film? Yes. Yes. It did freak me out a little bit, and I would say more so because as it was getting to the final 20 minutes or so, all of a sudden my electrics went. And there was a electrical outage in the area at that point. So all of a sudden, my dog's panicking a bit. I'm like, oh, wait, what's going on? I've also got kind of shite data signal where I am. So trying to find anything on the internet in terms of looking up if the postcode has been affected for an electrical outage took a while. Trying to get some light because this is in the middle of the night. Was a little bit sketchy, and it was just at a point when a lot of madness had occurred on screen, and we were entering the finale of the film. So it's a little bit sketchy when that occurs, but it's just bad timing, isn't it? When you watch horror films fairly often, what more can you expect? One of the notable things with regards to this, is that two of the producers are Evan Goldberg and Seth Rogen. Now, I don't know if this is their first foray into the world of horror, but, we've seen with the Halloween films, David Gordon Green had previously done horror films, Danny McBride, who's a writer on the recent Halloween trilogy, and I think also on the new Exorcist film series, which, oh boy, it's going to be kind of interesting to see if that's any good or not. I mean, I'm still trying to be optimistic. The latest trailer again gave me that mixture of, oh, this looks like absolute dog shit, but maybe it's okay. There's some scenes in the trailer, in the two trailers, that look like they could be interesting. But I mean, I still stand by. I don't know if I talked about this on the show or separately. I still stand by the logic of they've literally got can't remember the actress name, but she played Chris McNeil, so Regan's mum in the first film. They've literally got her back just for the connection, so I can go, oh look, it's her from the first film. The fact that they then have her going up to the possessed girl going, I've met you before. And the demon's like, oh, you know what? You want to know where Regan is? She's burning in hell. It's like, oh. I'm sorry. As much as The Exorcist is a classic, and it is a classic, I'll stand by it. The mum, during the exorcisms, and I'm not going to say didn't do jack shit because that's unfair, but she didn't perform the exorcisms. The priests did, and eventually it didn't even work from an exorcism. The guy had to sacrifice himself to get the devil out of Regan, the demon out of Regan, I should say, Pazuzu. I'm not going to undermine her character's role in the film because she was a caring mother trying to do the best for her daughter when no medical professionals knew exactly what was wrong with her. And also then, you know, it kind of looks like her daughter may have killed a friend of hers. Or almost certainly did. But then in this one, the trailer where she's just approaching the bed like, oh, I've met you before, I'm a hardened badass. Like, are they going to explain that the demon came back for Regan in the intervening years? I'm assuming so. I think I heard that Linda Blair is going to be involved, which automatically makes you think when they announce that someone is involved or they've signed on to a film that's already in production, that tells you they're going to have one day of filming or they're going to have a moment involved, you know. Yeah, with Edward Furlong. Edward Furlong's back for a new Terminator film. The film was already in production or whatever the circumstances are. And it turned out that they just used his likeness and superimposed it on a kid for the opening of the film. There's other instances that I can't quite think of at the moment, but you can guarantee if she's involved, it's going to be some sort of flashback or a side bit or just a sort of appearing like, oh, I heard you needed experience or some bullshit. I think the parts for the Exorcist trailer, not to go off on too much of a tangent, that I thought looked like it could potentially be maybe okay, were the moments prior to possession, where it's the girls going out into the woods, and I guess that's hearkening to the Slender Man type story, you know, and they disappear for a night or so, I think is the setup. I guess, you know, if done well, it could be similar to the tone, the setup of the first film, where Regan's just a lonely kid, her mum's a busy actress, and she plays with a Ouija board one night or whatever, and the contact is made via that. But there's nothing else in terms of the possession things in the two trailers for The Exorcist that make it look like scary possession. It makes it look like cookie cutter, run of the mill possession horror. Only time will tell. When it is out, I will go and watch it. It's a big event horror film. And I want to give any sort of film the benefit of the doubt. I'm not going to talk about what I usually talk about in regards to the director of that film, but I want to be optimistic. I mean, when we do an Exorcist show, it is one of those series where there's more bad films than good. That's just a fact. You know, you've really got the first film, the TV series, and the third film is decent. It's got one of the best jump scares in horror, but I think people go too far the other direction when they go, that's the best film in the series, actually. You know, that's the only good Exorcist film. It's like, I always think that's kind of like a poser thing to say. I mean, maybe that's people's genuine belief, but it's like The Exorcist 3 for me. It's decent, but it's very cut up and, you know, there was a lot of editing going on behind the scenes or cutting up of the film. it's got some cool moments, but it's also got some shonky moments. So that's why when I hear some people say, "Oh, that's the only good film," it just makes me think fucking poser. Yeah. Anyway, back to Cobweb. I enjoyed Cobweb. It held my attention, which is a rarity. It's got some interesting scare moments. It's got some good visceral horror later on in the film. Again, I think it's just when we do meet the person in the wall, it does feel a bit out of left field. I don't know if there could have been more, not necessarily signposting, because in terms of the story development, it wasn't so much out of left field. It's a horror film, you know. You're gonna have a bit of bait and switch. You know, that's not what there's any sort of issue with. But I suppose it's the presentation behind it that just sort of seemed a bit like, okay, so is this a supernatural film or not? Like, where are my expectations in regards to reality? That was the only thing that was slightly jarring for me. But the fact is, this is the first time. Well, it's a directorial debut. It's the look of the film is really quite cool and unique, and I enjoyed it. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10 for Cobweb. Check it out if you haven't already. Around the chat, sorry, trailer 2 for Exorcist Deceiver was bad. I didn't necessarily think it was any worse than the first trailer. I think it didn't really give me anything different personally, other than the whole opening with Chris McNeil? Which I did think was kind of shit. I don't know if it's one of those things where the trailers are presenting it kind of poorly, but it does kind of, and I'm assuming because it's Chris McNeil that gets approached, or you know how to deal with this, that something has happened to Regan in the interim, which is what kind of interests me, and hopefully it will confirm that they're ignoring The Exorcist 2 and making that non-canon, because that does follow Regan after the first film, and The Exorcist 2 is absolute dog piss. It's a really bad film. Anyway, we'll move on from Cobweb to the other new film I watched last weekend, which was The Nun 2. Now, we've talked about my experiences with the first Nun film. We'll go into that in a bit more detail later on the show, as this is the Conjuring episode of the show. But we're going to do our talking about The Nun 2 here. So when we start looking at the films of the series, we're kind of going to lead up to The Nun 2 and then discuss if there's any, you know, kind of what plans there are for future releases. But this is going to be when we're going to talk about that film. Obviously, do my best to not do any spoilers. You know, it's a new film. It's only been out a week. So I'll keep it as spoiler-free as possible. But The Nun 2 is a 2023 American Gothic supernatural horror film directed by Michael Chavez, with a screenplay written by Ian Goldberg, Richard Nang, and Akila Cooper from A Story by Cooper, serving as a sequel to The Nun and the 9th installment in the Conjuring Universe franchise. The film stars Taissa Farmiga, Farmiga, I should say, there's no N, Jonas Bloquet and Bonnie Aarons returning from the first film, with Storm Reed and Anna Popplewell joining the cast. Peter Safran and James Wan return as producers. So, I was quite interested in this because the character of the nun is one of the real standouts in the Conjuring universe. It was this demon introduced in The Conjuring 2, as we'll obviously talk about when we get there. And visually, just kind of clicked straight away. I don't know if it's James Wan, if it's Lee Winnell, or anyone else in the production team that does the design for the creatures, the demons, the entities in these films. but they're always so striking. Like, I mean, some people haven't really seen it or aware of it, but there was a film after the first Saw film, or after the first two Saw films, called Dead Silence, which was Lee Whannell and James Wan, I believe. I know at least James Wan was involved. And in that, there's this kind of creepy aesthetic, which is very similar for some of the characters in Insidious, when people the spirits in the Beyond, or in the Further, I should say, actually. This image of these large eyes with darkened eye makeup, creepy, terrifying smiles. It's a very sort of basic design, but the execution of it is really always quite striking. He did it again in The Conjuring, where we see I won't say Baphomet. It's not Baphomet. Whatever the name of the demon or the evil entity was in the first Conjuring film, that looked very striking and creepy. Again, with these really kind of large but yellowed sort of eyes, piercing black sort of makeup, darkness around the eyes, cracked skin with almost like sharpened teeth. Very, very creepy. And when they came back with The Conjuring 2, that introduced us to Valak, the demon that takes on the form that kind of instills the most kind of fear, which in this instance and in this franchise is that of a nun. And we had the first sort of spin-off for the Nun a few years prior to this, but due to that success, we were always going to get a sequel. So I went to the cinema to see this with my girlfriend last weekend. I had great fun. It made me jump quite a few times. She was hiding behind her horror pillow for the majority of the show, because she brought it with her because she knew that it was going to scare her. But what can I say about The Nun 2 without going too much into it? I mean, we'll do what we've done previously. We'll read kind of the initial startings of the blurb without going too far into it. Don't want to give any sort of spoilers away. But 1956, Father Noret and Jacques perform their daily chores at the sacristy, don't know if that's the correct pronunciation, of their church in Tarascon, France, after the celebration of daily mass. While investigating the disturbance, Noiret is raised into the air, set on fire, and burnt to death. All the while, Jacques watches as he clutches the priest's rosary. Following the events at Saint Cartha's monastery, Sister Irene now serves as a convent. Fucking hell, I can't read tonight. In Italy, Maurice works at a boarding school in France, where he has befriended a young Irish girl named Sophie, as well as a teacher and her mother, Kate. Irene has a vision of Maurice asking her to save him, and the next day she is sought by the cardinal to investigate a series of deaths across Europe. So, this is kind of then setting the scene for the fact that Maurice, as we saw at the end of The Nun, has in fact been possessed or infected by Valak, the nun. And that kind of connected his character to the first Conjuring film. It was a nice little touch at the end, because the character of Frenchie, or Maurice, appears very briefly in the first Conjuring film during a presentation, which is kind of setting up a moment where whatever her bloody name is, Irene, not Irene. Oh my god, Lorraine. What did I get fucking Irene from? Where Lorraine comes into contact with a pure evil that just sets her back from that particular exorcism. Is a nice little connection, because then it really, it brings kind of the first two Conjuring films full circle with that particular spin-off. But this is set kind of between The Conjuring and, this is, I think, 15 years prior to The Conjuring, but I think 3 or so years after the events of the first film, the first Nun film. And what I can say about the original Nun, and again, we'll go into a bit more detail later on, is that whilst a lot of the film was incredibly dark in terms of just a grey palette, a grey black palette. Everything was at night time for the majority of the film, other than like the very start and the very end of the film. So it was almost a bit sort of too dark to really give any emphasis to the fear of the dark. That said, visually there's some really interesting moments. There's almost like an artistic flair that I don't think The Nun really got its credit for. As much as it was a successful entry, I think the most financially successful film in the series. Story wise, The Nun wasn't brilliant. Excuse me, but visually there's some really interesting visuals occurring in that film in regards to Valak and its creepy smile with razor sharp teeth, moments where it's emerging from the water and it's almost becoming like 10 foot tall. Really quite interesting visuals in that. So with this film, they get the color palette correct. We are no longer constantly in greys and blacks. There are moments of darkness, but those moments are kind of heralding the appearance of the nun. So you're not in a constant sense of, I can't really see what's going on. You know, we have these daytime moments, the calms and the lulls, and you need those to ramp up the tension for the moments where something bad could be about to happen or is going to happen. You can't have I mean, you do get some films that do it well, where you've got basically a 90-minute white knuckle ride of terror. But I do find that you need that balance of those moments of the tension being relieved, or there's some calm, there's some investigatory work going on before then getting into the dark grittiness and the tension. So we've again got Taissa Farmiga back. She does a great performance in this again. She's a great leading lady in this. She's a bit of a scream queen coming from American Horror Story and also The Final Girls, which is a brilliant comedy horror film, definitely well worth a watch. She has a great performance. Also, Jonas Blauquet does a great job again as Frenchie. He's kind of the almost tragic individual in this, and that he's a really sort of caring individual. He's looking out for one of the girls, Sophie, who's a bit bullied by some other dickheads at the school. And he's not aware of what is going on. There's a real creepy moment quite early in the film, I suppose, probably maybe 20 minutes in, where this grocery seller, this little kid on a bike, goes down this kind of alleyway or into this building to drop off some groceries, I suppose, for the boarding school. And she can hear this strange sound, and it's all quite dark. And again, it works better because we've just come from a light street and we're now entering the darkness of this hallway. That's where you start getting the tension. There's been safety, and we're now, in a sense, unsafe. And she approaches what is revealed to be Frenchie, but he's just stood looking in a mirror, I think, from memory, making a strange sound, like a sort of sound, and his body's kind of shaking. And while that's occurring, and she's looking, going, "Mister, are you okay?" You then see from behind the mirror the long fingers of the nun appear around the corner, and then the orangey yellow eyes sort of appear. But that precedes a incredibly quick but violent death, in which it's established no fucking punches are being pulled in this instance. There's gonna be moments of violence. Again, it's a Conjuring film, so it's a Conjuring film. It's not a Malignant film, so it's not constant. There's not heavy bloodshed going on screen. But when moments like that occur, or other deaths that occur in the film, stand out a bit more because it's done in quite a tempered way. Again, talking about the visuals and artistic imagery, this does have that. Later on in the film, we find out some backstory, and I'm going to keep that vague. Not necessarily backstory directly about the demon, so I'll just sort of throw that in there now. But we find there is a cause going on in the story. There is a goal that is to be achieved. or is to be chased to be achieved, and chased to be stopped. So we get that in the exposition. Visually, that's quite interesting, quite dark, quite grimy at moments. But we do also get some moments where, again, it's almost like a bit of artwork where Valak emerges and just, again, looks fucking enormous. But it's not done in like a comical way. It's done in quite a creepy, artistic way. So I did quite enjoy that. I would certainly say I think it is better than the first film. And I do think the first film is fine. Wasn't a huge fan when I saw it in the cinema, but I do think on rewatches it's fine. It's certainly got some creepy moments. I do feel this has some creepy moments as well. It does it well. It made me jump a few times. You could say that this and some of the films in the Conjuring series are jump scares over substance, perhaps, but I always do find that the stories are fairly engaging. They're obviously not too complex, but they're fairly engaging narratives with memorable moments. So it's good popcorn horror at the end of the day. I'm going to give this a 7.5 out of 10. I think if we're going to compare it to what film I enjoyed more, Cobweb or The Nun, I would probably say The Nun slightly. Maybe if I saw the Cobweb in the cinema, perhaps. But with The Nun, you know what you're getting going into it. With Cobweb, I watched it, completely blind, really, other than the trailer. I liked what it did with it. I just, as I said in my review, there's just a couple of little things right near the end where I thought, okay, what are we working with here, And again, incredibly vague, but if you've seen the film, you may understand what I mean by that. You may not. You may think, what the fuck are you talking about, Tezz? Either way, 7.5 out of 10 for The Nun 2. That now leads us on to our featured presentation. And we are talking, of course, about Les Conjurants, the Conjuring film series. I remember when the first film came out 10 years ago. Fucking hell, man. Oh yeah, Lee Whannell isn't involved in the series. So I was talking about Lee Whannell earlier on, just assuming that both James Wan and Lee Whannell were involved in relation to obviously their connection with the Saw films. But no, it's just James Wan and a bunch of other people. Gary Doberman, David F. Sandberg, Michael Chavez, Corin Hardy, Gary Doberman. Yeah, okay, a bunch of people. Anyway, getting sidetracked as I tend to do. The Conjuring Universe is a supernatural media franchise and shared universe centered on a series of supernatural horror films. The franchise is produced by New Line Cinema, the Safran Company, and Atomic Monster, and distributed by Warner Brothers Pictures. The films present a dramatization of the supposed real-life adventures of Ed and Lorraine Warren, paranormal investigators and authors associated with prominent yet controversial cases of hauntings. The main series follows their attempts to assist people who find themselves harassed by spirits, while the spin-off films focus on the origins of some of the entities the Warrens have encountered. The franchise has been commercially successful, having grossed a combined $2.2 billion against a combined budget of $217 million, becoming the highest grossing horror franchise to date. The franchise has received mixed reviews. So, yeah, there's this partial slither of basis in reality with these films, but it is very much, the characters are based on actual people, and the case studies are based on recorded cases. Now I'm saying that incredibly vaguely because I've always kind of considered myself a skeptical believer, or an open-minded skeptic is actually really more accurate, because I can't necessarily say I'm a believer. I occasionally go through phases of liking watching those sort of ghost hunt shows, but it is very much phases. But my mentality is, until I've seen something or I've experienced something that I can't explain, or I can't assume there is a actual, you know, hypothesis or whatever behind it, then I will assume that it is fake. Now, I have been on a ghost hunt with my sister for her birthday, and I did have a couple of experiences which I couldn't explain at the time. Doesn't mean that there isn't an explanation, but in the moment, I thought this is a little bit creepy. Okay, in terms of a sudden feel of cold on the back of my neck and a sudden smell just out of nowhere, really strongly, of like a woman's perfume, but it felt like 1940s. It was really weird. Really hard to describe. Came out of nowhere, but it was quite creepy anyway. But more often than not, I will sort of look at those situations and go, well, let's talk about logical explanations. I think one of the better portrayals, and whether it was more film than entertainment documentary, I don't know. But as a film documentary, it was quite entertaining. Was Zach Bagans' Demon House. Now, going into watching that, and I think I watched it on stream actually a couple of years ago, the very early days of this Twitch channel, possibly. I thought he was a tool. I'd seen the very early series of Ghost Adventures on Sky, and I know my sister was a fan. And I always thought he came across like a douche, like a proper like bro, and it didn't seem very good or entertaining or legit at all to me. So when this documentary film appeared on Prime, I watched it and it's pretty creepy. And I remembered the case that it was talking about because that made international news. This house, which reportedly was fully haunted, was demonic. These kids getting taken to a hospital to be checked up on, and one of them being dragged up the wall, reported by a number of different random sort of like government officials. It's things like that when you hear it first on national news, or international news I should say, because it's in America, and then see years later the documentary about that house. You think, okay, I'm listening. I'm not saying I'm believing. I'm not saying, oh yeah, I'm all in. That's definitely true. You got to be skeptical about these things. You can't just jump to assuming, just because someone says something that it's accurate. I mean, especially in these days of the social media age, where Karen the hairdresser's a scientist and is more qualified to talk about neuroscience than people that studied it for decades. But anyway, in regards to the validity of the cases that these films are supposedly based on, you've got to take it with a little pinch of salt or a massive handful of salt. But development began over 20 years before the first film's debut, when Ed Warren played a tape of Lorraine Warren's original interview with Caroline Perron for producer Tony DeRosa Grund. DeRosa Grund made a recording of Warren playing back the tape and of their subsequent discussion. At the end of the tape, Warren said to DeRosa Grund, "If we can't make this into a film, I don't know what we can." DeRosa Grund then described his vision of the film for Ed. DeRosa Grund wrote the original treatment and titled the project The Conjuring. For nearly 14 years, he tried to get the film made without any success. He originally landed a deal to make the film at Gold Circle Films, the production company behind The Haunting in Connecticut, but a contract could not be finalized and the deal was dropped. DeRosa Grund, allied with producer Peter Safran and sibling writers Chad and Carey W. Hayes, were brought on board to refine the script. Using DeRosa Grund's treatment and the Ed Warren tape, the Hayes brothers changed the story's point of view from the Perron family to that of the Warrens. The brothers interviewed Lorraine many times over the phone to clarify details. By mid-2009, the property became the subject of a 6-studio bidding war that landed the film at Summit Entertainment. However, DeRosa Grund and Summit could not conclude the transaction and the film went into turnaround. DeRosa Grund reconnected with New Line Cinema, who had lost the original bidding war, and the studio ultimately picked up the film. The same year, on November 11th, a deal was made between New Line and DeRosa Grund's Evergreen Media Group. So we've got a number of films to discuss. There's been 9 released in total, but we've touched briefly on The Nun too, so we won't sort of go into that. But I remember when the first film had come out, I think we'd already seen a couple of. I think Insidious came out before this, but we'd already seen obviously the Saw films, Dead Silence. I'd seen. Um, yeah, Insidious was 3 years prior to this, and so it was another new horror film hitting the cinemas. I thought, well, I've got to watch it. The trailers for it looked pretty cool and effective. And it kind of became an event thing when there was like a new Conjuring type film. Me and my sister's friend Laird would go to the cinemas to watch these, and I would enjoy scaring some of my friends by making them watch The Conjuring. Specific moment that terrified an old flatmate of mine is the moment in this film when the mother of the family, the moment when she gets possessed, when she's lying on the bed, and the demon spirit suddenly levitates over a face, kind of levitates over her face, and it just is quite a moment, and then just sort of vomits this black goo into her mouth. I think that gave him nightmares for a couple of weeks. It's hilarious. But yeah, it was quite an event seeing these films, and we were introduced to the Annabelle doll. And whilst I was aware of Ed and Lorraine Warren, and probably more so in regards to the Amityville haunting, I'd never really looked into them too much. I kind of always assumed, are they kind of con artists? Because, and the reason I had that view, and I'm not saying that to trigger anyone that's a big Ed and Lorraine Warren fan in terms of the real people, not the film versions of them as protagonists. In regards to the real people, and there's a question that I might have raised to Crimson Mel when Crimson Mel was on the show discussing the reality behind the supernatural in horror. And I remember I kind of posed the question of, were they ever recorded or noted as having resolved a haunting issue? And if so, how so? And not really. I mean, they've been involved in a number of things: the Enfield haunting, the Amityville horror, the basis for The Conjuring, the first film. But as far as I'm aware, in real life, the hauntings still occurred at this property. So it just feels like, did they ever actually achieve anything? Or were they just kind of attaching themselves to these events and getting the publicity for it? I don't know. I wouldn't want to assume, but one kind of has to assume a little bit. But yeah, The Conjuring, the first film, 2013 American supernatural horror, is the inaugural film of the franchise. Stars Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga as Ed and Lorraine Warren, paranormal investigators and authors associated with prominent cases of haunting. Their purportedly real-life reports inspired the Amityville horror story and film franchise. The Warrens come to the assistance of the Perron family, who experienced increasingly disturbing events in their newly occupied farmhouse in Rhode Island in 1971. Development of the film began in January 2012, and reports confirmed one as the director of the film, entitled The Warren Files, later retitled The Conjuring. Production commenced in Wilmington, North Carolina in February 2012, and scenes were shot in chronological order, which is fairly rare, or isn't often kind of associated with filmmaking. You'd normally shoot out of sequence, shoot on the basis of, I guess, locations, props, availability, cost. But yeah, shooting in chronological order, interesting. Conjuring was released in the United States and Canada on July 19th, 2013 by Warner Brothers Pictures and New Line Cinema. Received positive reviews from critics who praised performances, direction, screenplay, atmosphere, and musical score. It grossed over $319 million worldwide against a $20 million budget. God damn. I need to reset myself. So this is probably the best film in the franchise. I would say. I mean, it's a franchise that I generally love. Mainly the mainline films, I will say. But it introduced us to Ed and Lorraine Warren, played by Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, who do great performances. Like, they are so endearing as the leads. I really feel if we didn't have them in the film series, it would still be good, wouldn't be as good, because they do a great job as the leads. I've no idea if that's what Ed and Lorraine Warren were like in real life. I've never really watched any interviews or footage with the real life Ed and Lorraine, but they really hold the franchise together. In terms of standout moments in this, there's the clapping game. There's a couple of creepy sequences with that where the mother is walking through the house playing the clapping game with her daughters, and then some hands that she assumes are her daughters come out of the closet to do the claps, but her daughter is behind her, not in the closet. The possession in the finale of the film, also the Annabelle doll. Lots of kind of creepy moments that really work well and help this film stand out. A dog does die in the film, which isn't very nice, but I suppose that is a typical film in these horrors to kind of showcase the supernatural, because the dog refused to go in the house because dogs are perceptive to this sort of thing. I don't know too much about the real life case that it is connected to. Do we have any kind of links to that? I don't actually think there are any kind of hyperlinks to that case on Wikipedia, at least, anyway. So pre-production began early 2011. Reports surfacing in June of that year that James Wan was in talks to direct. This was later confirmed by Warner Brothers, which also stated the film would be loosely based on real-life events surrounding Ed and Lorraine. January 2012, Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson were cast to star in the film. That month, Ron Livingston and Lily Taylor were also confirmed for roles in the film. In preparation for their roles, Farmiga and Wilson travelled to Connecticut to spend time with Lorraine Warren, who also visited the set during production. Over the course of spending 3 days at the Warren house, both actors took in information that could not otherwise be achieved from secondary research. I just wanted to absorb her essence. I wanted to see the details. She has such mad style. I just wanted to see the way she communicates with her hands, these gestures, her smile, how she moves through space, said Farmiga on her observation of Warren. So in regards to the series, this is obviously a huge success. I mean, massive return on investment. And of course, it led to other entries in the series, but instead of us getting a sequel first, we got the spin-off the following year, and that was Annabelle, 2014's Annabelle, directed by John R. Leonetti, written by Gary Doberman, and produced by Peter Safran and James Wan. I've realised I haven't got my usual little bits on screen. There we go. There's Annabelle for you. You're welcome. Produced by Peter Safran and James Wan, a prequel to the 2013 film The Conjuring and the second installment in the Conjuring Universe franchise. The film was inspired by a story of a doll named Annabelle, told by Ed and Lorraine Warren. The film stars Annabelle Wallis, Ward Horton, and Alfred Woodard. A spin-off focusing on the origins of the Annabelle doll that was introduced in The Conjuring was announced shortly after The Conjuring's release, mainly due to its worldwide box office success and the positive reception towards the depiction of the doll. Principal photography began in January 2014 in Los Angeles. Annabelle premiered at the TLC Chinese Theatre in Los Angeles on September 29th, 2014, and was theatrically released in the United States on October 3rd, 2014. Annabelle received negative reviews from critics, with many of whom feeling the film was inferior to its predecessor, but was praised for its atmosphere. It was a major box office success, grossing over $257 million against its $6.5 million production budget. Yeah, so I remember watching this and feeling that it was a marked drop down in quality from The Conjuring. So, sorry, I just had to get some water. So, there's a couple of creepy little jump scare scenes from memory. But as a whole, the performances aren't that great in it. The story isn't all that engaging. And this is definitely one of the lower points in the franchise. They're trying to introduce what has possessed the doll, and I suppose the origins of that doll. I think this is actually achieved much better in the prequel to this, the prequel to the prequel, which we'll get to a little bit later on. But yeah, I think I've always thought of Annabelle as a 5.5 or a 6 out of 10 film. It's fine, it's just not memorable. That's all I can really say on Annabelle. It's fine. The film is a spin off of The Conjuring, focusing on the origins of the Annabelle doll found in that film. The film was designed to be standalone, yet collectively catering to fans of The Conjuring who would already be familiar with the latter film. So, Backstage.com, the film was one of the first in a new strategy by distributors Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema that capitalizes on the built in fan bases for successful films, allowing for smaller budgets and production time with a bigger payout on the back end. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say, oh, you can tell it's a smaller budget than The Conjuring. I mean, we went through a kind of a boom period in the 2010s where, you know, Blumhouse, I guess specifically, were able to pump out horror films on sort of like 10 million or less budgets that would make hundreds of million on return and kind of show that, you know, do you really need like a massive budget on a horror film? I mean, Christ, you see some films that don't even have any sort of special effects or crazy locations, and the production budget for like a comedy, and I love good comedy, but you see some comedy films that have production budgets of 65 or 80 million, and you think, where has that money gone? Now, call me a layman here, but I kind of see those things and think, well, it hasn't. You haven't spent the money on special effects that I can see. Is it purely that there's some big names attached to it and they've all got high salaries for the film? I don't know. But then you see these horror films that have moments of effects and VFX and SFX and are able to achieve great things and look very good. But then you see the budget is like 10 million, 9 million, and it's made like 170 million back. I think, okay, well, you know, that's got to be a very attractive prospect for a studio to have. If we're talking money here. Yeah, I can't remember too much about this. I do remember a moment when you see the demon element crawling up some stairs, which was quite creepy. It's nothing special, I would say. I would say that's one of the weaker entries in the series. That did then lead us on to our next entry. We returned properly to the Warrens with The Conjuring 2. Now, I definitely remember seeing this in the cinema, and this was a great time. The Conjuring 2. 2016 American supernatural horror film, directed again by James Wan, screenplay by Chad Hayes, Carey W. Hayes, Wan, and Davia Leslie Johnson. Sequel to 2013's The Conjuring, the second installment of the Conjuring series, and the third installment in the Conjuring Universe franchise. Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga reprised their roles as the paranormal investigators, authors Ed and Lorraine Warren from the first film. The film follows the Warrens as they travel to England to assist the Hodgson family, who are experiencing poltergeist activity at their Enfield Council House in 1977, which later became referred to as the Enfield Poltergeist. In July 2013, before the release of the first film, it was reported that New Line Cinema was already developing a sequel with both Farmiga and Wilson signed on to reprise their roles. By October 2014, it was announced that Wan would return to direct the sequel and would make his first contribution as a writer in the franchise. Principal photography began in September 2015 in Los Angeles and concluded in December 2015 in London. Yeah, I mean, this film had a budget of 40 million, so doubled on the first film, and it made 321.8 million. You know what I'm saying? It's pretty successful. Pretty successful. Um, so, so when the start of this film features moments of the Amityville haunting, the Amityville house. It's a very iconic house. I can't remember the type of house, but it's almost become as famous as the case itself. When you see the windows, the design of the windows of the house, that alone sets it as an Amityville house. And we've talked before on the show about how the Amityville property is just, anyone does an Amityville film now, and it's just such a cheap cash grab. There's like the Amityville werewolf, the Amityville Karen, the Amityville shark. It's like, fucking hell, have some self-respect, you know? Care a little bit about your craft, just a little bit. Um, so that features in the opening of the film, which is a nice touch. It also sets up this kind of story of Lorraine having seen her husband's death. So there's this impending death that she wants to try to avoid, but at the same point they have this kind of obligation to use their abilities to help people. It also then introduces us to Valak, the demon nun, in incredibly creepy fashion, like easily one of the most memorable cinematic villains of recent years, I would have to say, quite easily. But it's quite interesting. This focuses on the Enfield haunting. Now, prior to watching the film, I was aware of the Enfield haunting. I've read bits and bobs on it in the past. I've always got a bit of an interest in, oh, this supposed haunted event or this supposed haunted location in the UK or wherever. The curious side of me always kind of wants to go, right, what happened? I've got my skeptic's hat on, but I've also got my open-minded blazer on. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. I'm intrigued to hear what has been recorded to make people assume, or some people believe, that these are true cases of hauntings. But as I say, that doesn't mean I read these things and go, "Oh wow, that happened." Oh, I can't believe that happened. That's crazy. You know, you got to read between the lines sometimes, people. But I remember with the Enfield haunting, from what I'd looked into in terms of the images and stuff, I thought fucking farce. I thought it's the kids bullshitting. There's even moments where there's a picture of one of the girls being levitated, and I was like, she is jumping in midair. That is a jump that would be very easy to achieve. Not saying I could do it. I can't get much air in the. I can't get much air in the air. I'm a big boy, but you know, and the fact that they said also, oh, if you hear the recordings, it doesn't sound like it's her voice. This is meant to be a girl. Sorry, but have you heard some girl vocalists in metal? Like, there's the singer of Ginger. I can't remember what her name is. You know, people can put on voices, and people have different abilities at, you're doing a horrible voice. You know, just, it's, you can't automatically assume that is what that is. You know what I'm saying? So again, the professional skeptic of me, when I kind of saw that this was about the Enfield haunting, I thought, okay, let's see how they portray this. And what I liked about it is they played into that, and they made that part of the story, that the allegations that this was all a fraud, and you're always going to get that with haunting cases. Of course you are, because it would be madness if everyone went into it going, yeah, this is obviously true, and buying into it. You have to have professional skepticism to validate whether or not things really are true. You know, if things can still prove to be true without a shadow of a doubt after being under the microscope of skepticism, then there you go. But without that, then it's kind of a bit of a free for all. And so in this, there are the allegations of the girls are faking it. The girls have been seen bending the cutlery and jumping around. But they make that work with the story, and that the demon has told the girl that's sort of being possessed, do this or I'll kill your siblings, or make them go away, or I'll hurt your family, something like that. So it's done in a way that acknowledges the skepticism of the case, or the bullshit of the case, I could say, but also in the same way of presenting it as a true event that occurred, as the basis for these Conjuring films, with Ed and Lorraine coming in and saving the day. Now, this does also establish a bit of a interesting setup with regards to the demon nun Valak. So, whilst we're introduced to it in this film very creepily, ultimately its undoing is hearing its name. Now, that's not a new concept. It's one of those things where to take away a demon's power in kind of, I suppose, traditional literature or mythology is to say its name. When you say its name, you know, it takes away its dominion. It's things like that. I don't know the all the ins and outs, right? But I'm sure that it gets directly addressed in, obviously they hadn't made them at this point, The Nun and The Nun 2. Now, it could be because of different circumstances, the different types of haunting, maybe, I don't know. But, yeah, you'd sort of think that the writers for The Nun 2 would maybe have to go, well, we can't address it by name, because to do that would then mean that we'd have to have it be sent back to hell, potentially. But that's an interesting kind of point of how they resolve things in The Conjuring 2. But yeah, Conjuring 2, it was another huge success. Generally received positive reviews from critics and grossed over 320 million worldwide. After the success of the first film, it was greenlit for a sequel to occur. There had been positive test screenings and reviews of the first film. Final Destination 5 writer Eric Hesserer would later be brought in to doctor the Hayes script, focusing mainly on dialogue. In January 2015, David Lee Johnson was hired for rewrites. The film deals with the case of the Enfield poltergeist, which took place in the London borough of Enfield from 1977 to 79, and involved the alleged haunting of two sisters, aged 11 and 13, at their mother's council house. The Conjuring 2 also touches on the Warrens' most famous and most documented case, the Amityville Horror. So, the Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga had signed on to reprise their roles. This was confirmed in 2014. In early 2015, lead actors Farmiga and Wilson visited Lorraine at her New England Paranormal Research Center in Connecticut in preparation for the roles. So they must have visited her again then. On July 28th, 2015, one officially began pre-production for the film. The film was granted $5.6 million in tax credits from the California Film Commission for bringing the production to the state. On September 13th, 2015, Don Burgess was confirmed as the film's director of photography. And yeah, this is just staffing details there. Yeah, I mean, so critically, it was much better received than Annabelle. Can't blame it. It's much better. Now, one of the things I should mention is obviously this had some spin-offs, and we will get to the spin-offs of The Nun shortly. So 2016, June 15th, it was reported that a spin-off titled The Nun would be focusing on the demon nun character of Valak, being in development with Johnson writing the script and Safran and Wan producing. But also, there was mention of a possibility of a Crooked Man film. Now, the Crooked Man is a character that features very briefly in the film. Now, I had skepticism when this was announced. When they announced that there were spin-off films of The Nun, I'd already seen Annabelle, thought Annabelle was kind of wank, wasn't that great. When they mentioned about the spin-offs of The Nun and the Crooked Man, I kind of thought, The Nun? Okay, yes, because that's an interesting-looking character. Terrifying. That nun just really works well. It's this image of a nun, but there's just this horribleness in the face and this dark, terrifying appearance. The Crooked Man is quite CGI heavy. It just sort of plays into this story that the kid, I can't remember what his name is in the family, sees on his little spinny toy that comes to life a bit later on in the film. Now, obviously, one, I didn't think the Crooked Man actually came to life, not just in the real life haunting case, but in terms of in the film, I very much thought that was a trick being played on the family by the demonic nun, or the ghost, or whatever ghostly apparitions in the house. So when they announced that there was going to be a Crooked Man film, I thought, oh, okay, come on now, this doesn't sound very good to me. But May 31st, 2017, Peter Safran said there was a possibility of a Crooked Man film. On June 14th, 2017, it was reported that a spin-off film titled The Crooked Man, featuring the character of the same name from The Conjuring 2, is in development, with Mike Van Wees writing the screenplay from a story by James Wan, with Safran and Wan set to produce the project. In November 2022, Wan announced that, outside of his control, the project was not moving forward, and at that time, while expressing hope for a potential future release. I would always be kind of skeptical about a Crooked Man film. It had a creepy little moment in the film, but I didn't think the CGI was all that great on it. And I would say that was probably my least favourite moment in the film, was the Crooked Man, personally. So yeah, that was a potential spin-off, which I don't think is a great loss that we didn't get, personally. But we then received, next year, as seems to be the case, we get a Conjuring film. A year later, we gone to get an Annabelle film. And we got the prequel to Annabelle, called Annabelle Creation, 2017 American supernatural horror film, directed by David F. Sandberg, written by Gary Doberman, and produced by Peter Safran and James Wan. It's a prequel to 2014's Annabelle and the fourth installment in the Conjuring Universe franchise. The film stars Stephanie Sigma, Talitha Bateman, Lulu Wilson, Anthony LaPlagia, Miranda Otto, and depicts the possessed Annabelle doll's origin. In October 2015, it was confirmed that Annabelle sequel was in development. It was later revealed that the film would be a prequel rather than a sequel. Lights Out director David F. Sandberg replaced John R. Leonetti as director, with Doberman returning to write the script and Safran and Wan returning to produce. Principal photography began in June 27, 2016 in Los Angeles, California, and concluded on August 15, 2016. Annabelle Creation premiered at the LA Film Festival on June 19, 2017, and was theatrically released in the United States on August 11th. The film grossed $306 million worldwide against a budget of $15 million, and received generally positive reviews from critics, who noted it as an improvement over its predecessor. So this I went into with lower expectations. I'd watched The Conjuring 2, thoroughly enjoyed it, but Annabelle, the original Annabelle, not my bag of potato chips. Didn't think it was that good. Just seeing the chat, Vix. Oh no, I paused it and then lost 40 minutes. Oops. Oh dearie me. Well, it's a good thing that these things go out on VOD. So don't panic too much, Vix. Don't worry. But Annabelle Creation, it is a huge step up. I think it helps that we've got David F. Sandberg directing. So he did Lights Out, which I think was a generally very good film, although I do think that the very end of the film just sends out a little bit of a bad message. Just because this woman's being terrorized and all this stuff's occurring, and the story gets elaborated on, and it's very creepy. But the end result for her character was essentially, I don't know how to put this in ways that don't get sort of flagged up online, because I know that certain words can get flagged up on streams and affect them. But she essentially has to take the route of offing herself, and I just always remember watching the film, getting up to that point and thinking, that doesn't really send that seems to be sending a bit of an unintentionally a bit of a bad message. It's not promoting that at all, but it's kind of like this woman has this manifestation. It's like a manifestation of a demon, but it's an actual person who's got an affliction, and it's then blah blah blah. But it almost seems to kind of come across as a woman who's plagued by a terrible affliction, which is then affecting those around her, and ultimately the only way to stop it is to off herself. You know what I mean? And it was one of those things that kind of left a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth after such a really good film. But he is a great director. I don't know if he also wrote Lights Out or not, so, Not going to say that choice is entirely his. But he also, from a filmmaker perspective, or a retired filmmaker or whatever I am these days, he was always quite inspiring because he has a channel on YouTube called like Pony Smasher, I think is the username, where he will make short films with his wife in his apartment. And he puts them online, and then a few weeks later he puts on a video of how he made them. And he even talks about some of the editing that he did, because he did some of the editing himself for Annabelle Creation. And he shows you how he did the opening credits scroll, where it's kind of scanning around this room that's got all this like sort of literature, like Bible literature around it. And he shows you how he made that. He basically just went, right, got all these scans of Bible text, puts it into this software, Chorus or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it's called. And then you just track where you want the camera to pan round. Bob's your uncle, there's your opening. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting insight into a filmmaker's process, I have to say. So he's definitely one to keep an eye out for. I know he's more into the superhero films these days. He did the Shazam films. Just have a quick little look. So yeah, he did Lights Out in 2013. Yeah, he did pretty much everything on it except act. Well, he did the Lights Out short. So Lights Out was a short first. I think I have seen it. Yeah, then did Annabelle, then he's done Shazam and Shazam Fury of the Gods. So in this film, we see a doll maker named Samuel Mullins and his wife Esther grieve for the loss of their 7-year-old daughter Annabelle, nicknamed Bee, who dies after she accidentally steps in front of a car. Very tragic opening to the film. Instantly it kind of knocks you for 6. And then the home kind of gets turned into an orphanage out in the sticks. This is such a step up in comparison to Annabelle. The performances are all really good in this film. The demonic moments. There's a moment where one of the characters tries to fend off the evil later on in the film, holding up a crucifix to this kind of off-screen, I'm sure it's an off-screen presence, but while he's holding up this crucifix, his thumb and his fingers then get bent back by an invisible force. And it's one of those things where it's just like, oh no, you can imagine that would be flipping painful and terrifying, but also just painful. You never want to see joints go the wrong way. I often see on Instagram reels, you get all this random crap on there, and more often than not, it's people just jumping on trends. And after the show, I'll have a rant about that, because we will do a watch party after the show. But you'll get people using like a leg press, and on those ones I always have to skip the video because they're going to lock their knees out. So if you don't know what it is, a leg press is basically a large plate that you will push weight with, and you put the weights on the end, and you can push it to create strength in your legs. What you should never do the leg press is lock your knees. Your legs should never go fully straight with your locked knees, because things can go wrong there. The whole point is you're meant to be building strength in your leg muscles, so they're under tension. And when that happens, it looks absolutely horrible, because essentially the leg bends the wrong direction. So creepy as anything. Fran in the chat. So what was the deal with the Curse of La Llorona? Well, we'll talk about that one shortly. In terms of release order, we've got one more, and then we will get onto that one. But that is quite interesting. Currently, that is listed on the listing of released films in the series. Now, recently, it was mentioned, I can't remember who, by someone somewhere involved in I don't know, it might have even been Jason Blum, and these aren't Blumhouse films as far as I'm aware. Someone had said that that the Curse of La Llorona isn't part of the Conjuring Universe, but as far as I'm aware, it is marked, and I'm pretty sure on my Blu-ray, I'm pretty sure on that it says part of the Conjuring Universe. So Fran says, what was the deal with the Curse of La Llorona? Did they consider it as part of the Conjuring Universe but back away from it when it wasn't very good? You had Father Perez in this, and Annabelle had a brief Annabelle cameo. It's an odd one. But Annabelle Creation, yeah, 15 million budget, 306.5 million return. It was confirmed in October 2015 that an Annabelle sequel was in development. David S. Sandberg replaced the original director. He described himself as a fan of the franchise, especially the first one, since they were more of a classic old-school horror movie in many ways. James Wan, New Line Cinema, approached Sandberg to helm the sequel during the post-production on Lights Out after they were impressed by the early cuts of the film. Sandberg and Wan had met each other during production of Lights Out, as the movie was produced by Wan's Atomic Monster. Sandberg did not want to direct another formulaic horror sequel, but after reading the script and realizing how it deviated from the first film, he agreed to direct it. He was attracted to it as it was a standalone film, as a result of which he had more creative freedom. The fact that it was a good period piece made it more appealing to him. The first film screenwriter, Gary Doberman, returned to write the script, with Peter Safran and James Wan returned to produce. In March 2017, Sandberg revealed the film would be a prequel to the original Annabelle film and titled it Annabelle Creation. Sandberg drew references from the look of the 1963 psychological horror film The Haunting, due to its use of CinemaScope cinematography, and cited the score of The Shining to be the biggest inspiration for the film's chilling music. He also borrowed inspiration from the old-school feel of The Conjuring. He decided to rely upon tension and suspense as opposed to jump scares. Unlike his debut film Lights Out, in which he meticulously crafted each scene beforehand, Sandberg had a different approach to Annabelle Creation. With Annabelle, he was inspired by the set and moment, and so did not prepare with extensive storyboards or diagrams, instead relying on the mantra, "We'll figure it out on set together, we'll make it work." Sandberg softened some of the Annabelle's features to make her more believable as a child's toy, having the cheeks filled out and fixing her overbite. He found shooting with the doll challenging since the object was immobile, and he needed to use other objects, such as a sheet, to make her move around. Father Robert was a consultant on the film. So, yeah, I mean, this has many more memorable moments than the original Annabelle. There is a moment where some of the girls get locked in this farmhouse, part of the set in the finale, and we again get a demonic sort of presence pursuing them in the dark. Very, very creepy. And actually, the farmhouse does feature in quite a few of the really good scares in this film. And the performances all around, and it does connect to the original as much as and I say the original, the first Annabelle film. As much as the story in the first Annabelle I didn't think was great, the way that this connects with the reveal of who one of the characters actually is and who they appear as later in Annabelle was quite a nice little twist that I didn't really see coming. Certainly took me by surprise, but it does a nice job of connecting the tissue between those entries. So, after the success of Annabelle Creation, we then received in 2018 what I believe is the most financially successful film in the series, and that was The Nun in 2018. We've got another offer of promotion for channel views and bots. Thank you, AutoMod. I will deny that posting. Thank you. I'll take it as a sign of the show's doing well to get that kind of random traffic. So, The Nun, 2018. American gothic supernatural horror film directed by Corin Hardy and written by Gary Doberman, from a story by Doberman and James Wan. It is a spin-off prequel of 2016's The Conjuring 2 and the fifth installment in this franchise. The film stars Taissa Farmiga, who is the sister of Vera Farmiga, Damien Burchin and Jonas Splauket, with Bonnie Aarons reprising her role as the demon nun, an incarnation of Valak from The Conjuring 2. I've just hovered over Bonnie Aarons. She was the bum in Mulholland Drive. One of the scariest scenes in Mulholland Drive features her. Never knew that. There we go. Interesting. The plot follows a Roman Catholic priest and a nun in a what the fuck's that word? A novitiate. The novitiate, also called the novitiate, is the period of training and preparation that a Christian novice monastic apostolic or member of a religious order undergoes prior to taking their vows. As they uncover an unholy secret in 1952 Romania. Oh my god, I got the burps. 1952 Romania. Warner Brothers Pictures and New Line Cinema announced The Nun, a spin-off film to The Conjuring 2, which had opened 5 days earlier, with Safran and One producing. The initial script for the film was written by David Leslie Johnson. Hardy had signed on to direct The Nun with a new screenplay from One and Doberman, Dauberman. Principal photography began in May 2017 in Bucharest, Romania, and during filming, the set was blessed by an Eastern Orthodox priest. Why can't I read tonight? The Nun was released in the United States on September 7th, 2018 by Warner Brothers Pictures. Critics praised its performances and atmosphere, but criticised its weak narrative and inconsistent logic. It grossed $365 million worldwide, becoming the highest film in the series. So, this very much did feel to me a film where they went, okay, we've struck gold with this character of a demonic nun, or a demon that takes the appearance of a nun. So we need to play into that. Take it back to its roots, and have a bunch of nuns around in this creepy monastery. But in terms of the story, it was pretty threadbare. The cast is headed by Damien Birchin's Father Burke and Taissa Farmiga's sister Irene, but really she is the star of the film. It wasn't a big surprise to me that he doesn't return. His character died off screen between this and the second film. And that's not really a spoiler, that's kind of revealed in dialogue in the opening 15 minutes of the film. But Father Burke, while he is a central performer, the story and the journey really does follow Sister Irene as she takes her next steps. And she uses her abilities in this film. She, I suppose, kind of similar to Lorraine Warren, has supernatural abilities. In this, she kind of has this. She has these visions, these moments of clarity, I guess you could say. But outside of that, with the script, it all just seems to be, well, there's an evil trying to get out, and later on we find out about where that evil comes from. It was, satanic rites done in the basement of this church, which was stopped by the Knights Templar before. I'm assuming it's the Knights Templar before the rites could be completed, but still the gateway was partially opened, and this demon emerged, which now haunts and has been haunting to various extents these halls. But it is one of those films where it's probably best not to think too much about the story in regards to the logic of it. It's got certainly some decent imagery, as we mentioned earlier on when discussing The Nun 2. But a lot of the film is just greys and black imagery. Lighting, I should say, actually, more accurately. Yeah, it's okay. It's not great. There's not too much really about how the film was kind of put together. Just that, it was another entry in the series. And that then led us 1 year later. And we got 2 films actually in 2019. Aren't we lucky? That led us 1 year later to what is listed here as a film in the series, The Curse of La Llorona, also known as The Curse of the Weeping Woman in some markets, is a 2019 American supernatural horror film directed by Michael Chavez. Let's change the imagery there. In his feature directorial debut and written by Mickey Dougherty and Tobias Iaconis. It is the 6th installment in the Conjuring Universe franchise, and based on the Latin American folklore of La Llorona. The film stars Linda Cardellini, Raymond Cruz, and Patricia Velasquez, and follows a mother in 1973 Los Angeles who must save her children from a malevolent spirit trying to steal them. The film was produced by James Wan through his Atomic Monster banner. The Curse of La Llorona premiered at South by Southwest on March 15th, 2019, and was theatrically released in the United States on April 19th, 2019. It received negative reviews from critics and grossed 123 million worldwide against a budget of 9 million, becoming the lowest grossing film in the Conjuring franchise, though still successful at the box office. So again, there's nothing here saying that it is not part of the Conjuring franchise. So that must have been a very recent comment from someone looking to dispel it and say, hey, all of our films are hits. I mean, no, but they're all successful. You know, just you can't just have all good kids. Sometimes you have to have the shite kid. As a pet, if you're a parent, I'm sure every parent loves all their kids, but I'm sure, you know, there's got to be some shitters. I can't really remember much about this film. I do own it. It's part of my little collection. I think the main sort of takeaway from the film is that it was quite forgettable. There wasn't really any standout moments. I mean, even that poster artwork that appeared just a moment ago, official poster artwork, did say something about The Conjuring. I'm just going to wait for it to appear on screen because I don't have it to hand saved elsewhere. It should appear on screen in a moment. From the producers of the Conjuring Universe. Okay. That's not necessarily saying as part of the Conjuring Universe. From the producers of the Conjuring Universe. I'm just looking at some other artwork. But it is listed here. Interesting. So, in October 2017, New Line Cinema announced to distribute a horror film directed by Michael Chavez with James Wan and It and Annabelle writer Gary Dauberman serving as producers. Then titled The Children, by July 2018, the film was renamed The Curse of La Llorona, with Linda Cardellini was cast to play a single mother and the lead character. Sean Patrick Thomas and Raymond Cruz co-starring in the film. After the first trailer release, it was revealed that Tony Amendola was returning as Father Perez, last seen in the film Annabelle. The character gives direction to the family being tormented by the titular spirit and relates the haunting to his experiences with the demonic entity attached to the doll. By March 2019, the Curse of La Llorona was revealed to be part of the Conjuring Universe, making it the 6th installment in the franchise. Despite this, the film's director has insisted that it is not part of the Conjuring Universe. So there you go. There's where we've got a bit of mixed signals. Interesting. Yeah, it's just not a very memorable film. The only thing that I really remember about this film, there is a moment where the ghost is being followed down a creepy alleyway, which leads to a jump scare. Also, I suppose the finale of the film, I think, is around a pool from memory. Again, I haven't seen it since I picked up the Blu-ray. I didn't watch it in the cinema. It's alright. And that then leads us to, in the same year, there was another Annabelle film. Annabelle Comes Home. 2019 American supernatural horror film written and directed by Gary Dauberman in his directorial debut, from a story by Dauberman and James Wan, who also serves as a producer with Peter Safran. Serves as a sequel to 2014's Annabelle and 2017's Annabelle Creation, and is the 7th installment in the Conjuring Universe franchise. The film stars McKenna Grace, Madison Eisman, and Katie Sarif, along with Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson, who reprised their roles as Ed and Lorraine Warren. In early April 2018, Warner Bros. Pictures announced that a then untitled film in the Conjuring Universe franchise would be released on July 3rd, 2019. Later that month, it was announced that the film would be another installment in the Annabelle series, with Dauberman signed on to write and direct in his directorial debut, based on the story treatment written by Dauberman and Wan. Principal photography commenced by mid-October and officially wrapped in December 2018 in Los Angeles. Theatrically, it was released in the United States on June 26, 2019 by Warner Brothers Pictures and New Line Cinema. It grossed over $231 million worldwide against a $27 million budget. So, this is quite a well-loved entry in the series from what I gather. I think it's quite middle of the road. Personally. I don't know why. I've tried to watch this film twice. I've watched this film twice. I've wanted it to like it more than I have both times. Well, the first time I watched it, I was like, oh, sweet, new Conjuring film. I think it had appeared on the sort of Sky Premiere portion of the store. There used to be a feature, I don't know if there still is, when films would come to Sky Premiere before the home release. So it's probably finished its cinema run. And this is before COVID, where, you know, you could then watch films essentially a couple of weeks after they came out in the cinema. This is kind of prior to that period, I believe. But there would be this function where, you know, before the film comes out, you could buy it and watch it at home, and you would then receive the Blu-ray or DVD, whatever your preference is, when that gets released in a few weeks' time. So I did that with a few films. You know, it's quite expensive because it is a little bit of a premium service. But for things like the It films, where I really loved the first It, the second film, just the ending of it just ruined it for me. But you know, and the Scream 5, whatever year that was released, I did that through that because, again, I couldn't get to the cinema to watch it. I really wanted to watch it. So when that option was there, I thought, well, I'm going to end up owning it anyway. Why not utilize this to watch it now? And then at least you're not paying the premium to just rent it and watch it once. You're paying the premium to watch it early, but also receive a physical release. Anyway, the concept is interesting. That kind of the shit hits the fan over one night and there's all these different spirits occurring around the house. I think for me, it's just that it doesn't feel like there's any stakes and there's no truly scary moments that I can remember in this film. Also, one of the leads that causes a lot of this shit just comes across as a brat, I thought, and I don't know if that was intentional or not. It just... I don't know. I think this kind of solidified me into thinking, for me as a fan of the series, of the Conjuring films, that Annabelle Creation was the exemption to the rule that the Annabelle films aren't great. That was kind of my outcome of this, because I thought Annabelle Creation was great. Annabelle was a bit of a nothing film. Annabelle Comes Home kind of felt like that was a bit of a nothing film. So it didn't really do much for me, I have to be honest. And all the various ghosts in this just didn't really hit with me, to be honest. So in early April 2018, Warner Brothers announced that a then untitled film, The Conjuring franchise, would be released. So we've kind of read all that. During the 2018 San Diego Comic-Con, Wan and Saffron revealed the film's events would take place after Annabelle and would focus on the doll after she had been placed in the glass case in the Warrens Museum. Doberman later confirmed this, stating that the film would take place shortly after the beginning of The Conjuring, where the titular character is introduced, but also before many of the events of the first installment. In September 2018, McKenna Grace was cast in the film as Judy Warren, the Warrens' 10-year-old daughter, replacing Sterling Jerrings, who played Judy Warren in the first two films. And Madison Eisman was one of Judy's teenage babysitters. By October, Katie Serif had joined the cast. Later that same month, it was announced that Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga would reprise their roles as Ed and Lorraine Warren. Principal photography commenced by mid-October in Los Angeles, with Michael Burgess serving as cinematographer. Yeah, there's not really too much more on that, but it was a film. It came out. It was entertaining enough, but it didn't stick with me, I've got to be honest. So I guess because of me just finding that, you know, the Nun, I remember thinking, as I've said ad nauseum, wasn't that impressed in the cinema on home release. It's okay. It's decent. Curse of La Llorona, incredibly forgettable. Only watched it the once. Annabelle Comes Home didn't really hit with me. I thought that's fine. It's fine, but it's not hitting. So by the time that 2 years later, and obviously in this interim we'd had, COVID, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It was released. So I didn't get down to the cinema to see this. I can't remember exact sort of timelines of where we were in the pandemic and blah, 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 but I just didn't get chance or, whatever to go and see this at the cinema. But The Conjuring Devil Made Me Do It is a 2021 American supernatural horror film directed by Michael Chavez, with a screenplay by David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick from a story by Johnson McGoldrick and James Wan. The film serves as a sequel to The Conjuring and Conjuring 2 and is the 8th installment in the Conjuring universe. Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga reprised their roles as paranormal investigators and authors Ed and Lorraine Warren, with Rory O'Connor, Sarah Catherine Hook, and Julian Hillard also starring. Wan and Peter Safran returned to produce the film, which is based on the trial of Arnie Cheyenne Johnson, a murder trial that took place in 1981 Connecticut. In addition to The Devil in Connecticut, a book about the trial. Oh, sorry, wait, what? A murder trial that took place in 1981 Connecticut. In addition to The Devil in Connecticut, so that was also what it was based on, I guess, a book about the trial written by Gerald Brittle. The grammar in there just kind of threw me a little bit. Initial development for a third Conjuring film began in 2016, though Wan stated that he would not be directing another film in the series due to scheduling conflicts with other projects. Safran confirmed that the next film would not be a haunted house film. By June 2017, it was officially announced that a third installment was in development, with David Leslie Johnson hired to write the screenplay. Michael Chavez was announced as the film director after previously directing The Curse of La Llorona. Filming took place in Georgia in summer of 2019. Originally slated for a 2020 September release, the film was delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Conjuring The Devil Made Me Do It was released by Warner Brothers Pictures New Line Cinema in the United States on June 4th, 2021, where it had a simultaneous month-long release on the HBO Max streaming service. The film grossed $206 million against a budget of $39 million and received mixed reviews from critics who praised the performances of Wilson and Farmiga, but criticized the screenplay and noted it to be weaker than the previous installments. So I kind of, because of my feelings or lack of interest in some of the prior installments, my interest in this wasn't that high for me to go down to the cinema when this came out in the film. But I then made sure to get it when it came on home release. I can't remember if I purchased it first or if I rented it. I'm fairly sure I own it. I must have purchased it first. I must have just watched the purchase. But I was pleasantly surprised. Now, in terms of the demonic elements, we do get in this film more of, there are demonic things occurring. There are satanic things or possession type things occurring. Of course, there is a possession in this film, which makes the case of, the main murder case is that the devil made me do it. I was possessed. But this is the first film we also get a bit more of an influence of the connection between humanity and the demonic side of things, in that we're introduced to a Satanist, for want of a better term, a Satanist who is causing these events behind the scenes and almost causes Ed to kill Lorraine. So you could look at that and think, oh, well, I mean, Christ, it's one thing making the Enfield haunting look legitimate, but this, none of that stuff happened. Well, no, but Valak the Nun didn't attack things during the Enfield haunting. It's things dramatized and ramped up for cinematic benefit. At the end of the day, it's a film. You're looking to put in a good story and sell tickets, and part of the way of doing that is saying it's based on a true story, but you've then also got to ramp up the drama and the flash and the flare through narrative choices and artistic license. So I was actually fine with that. I think that this was a return for the series. Not that it had really, really sort of like kind of dropped, but it had kind of gone a bit middling after some very, very interesting and entertaining entries. I mean, we've again got Lorraine and Ed front and center. Patrick Wilson, Vera Farmiga, they do great in this film. They're kind of furthering their story along. We're introducing more moments of peril that they themselves are directly involved in. If you think about it, in the first two Conjuring films, they're only really experiencing and fighting the supernatural in the finales of those films, because things are occurring that they're coming in to assess and assist with and ultimately vanquish. But in this one, their investigation kind of puts them directly involved in it, and there's moments where Lorraine is almost tricked into running off the side of a cliff, which is what had happened to some people earlier on due to these like sort of curses, and also a corpse in a morgue. It looks like it may be getting possessed to put them in some peril. So it's quite an interesting move to kind of once again have these guys front and center, but even more so from the outset, in that they're not coming in. They are coming in to help people, but kind of straight from the off, outside of the intro of the film, they're coming under duress. So I feel that this was a real sort of return for the series. In 2016, regarding further potential sequels, James Wan stated there could be many more Conjuring movies because the Warrens have so many stories. Screenwriters Chad and Carey W. Hayes also expressed interest in working on a story for another sequel. However, Wan stated that he may be unable to direct the film due to his commitments to other projects. He told Collider, assuming we are lucky enough to have a third chapter, there are other filmmakers that I would love to sort of continue on the Conjuring world if we are lucky enough. One also noted that if a third film were to be made, it would be ideally taking place in the 1980s. One later stated that the sequel could include lycanthropy. Maybe we can go and do it like a classic American Werewolf in London style. The Warrens set against the backdrop of the Hound of the Baskerville. In May 2017, Safran said it would be unlikely that a third installment would be a haunted house film. In June of 2017, it was announced that a third installment was in development, with the Conjuring 2 co-writer David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick hired to write the screenplay. In August 2017, One told Entertainment Weekly that the filmmakers had been working hard on The Conjuring 3 and that we're in the midst of working on the script and still hashing it out. We want to make sure that the script is in a really good place. With how much people have loved the first two Conjuring films, I don't want to rush into the third one if possible. By September of the following year, producer Peter Safran stated the script was near completion and that production would begin sometime during 2019. In May 2019, it was revealed that James Wan co-wrote the story with David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick. So, that was the final Conjuring film. We obviously got The Nun 2 is the latest entry, which we discussed in the review section. But in October 22, The Hollywood Reporter revealed that a fourth mainline film was in development. It will be written by David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick and produced by James Wan and Peter Safran. Are there any other reported entries elsewhere? So yes, the potential sequel, nicknamed at the moment Last Rites. One later confirmed that Wilson and Farmiga would reprise their respective roles. In April 2023, during CinemaCon, the film's title was revealed. In September 23, Michael Chavez stated that work on script was continuing, stating that the project was intended to be seen as a finale of the stories in the franchise that had come before. Yeah, they've talked about some other films, a film centering around The Bride from Annabelle Comes Home as a slasher film. But I'll be honest, I can't remember The Bride. I remember The Ferryman. That's about it. They've looked at some other things. The Occultist that was working with a demon from The Devil Made Me Do It and looking to maybe spin off from that. And then obviously, as we mentioned, The Crooked Man, which I'm fine with that not coming out. There's also been a number of short films released. There's been The Nurse, The Confession, What's Wrong with Mom, Blund's Lullaby, and Innocent Souls. I've not seen any of those. And we do have news that an untitled television series in the franchise has been announced as being in development. I think we discussed it on the show earlier this year. It's set to be a joint venture production between New Line Television, Warner Bros., television studios, Warner Brothers Television Studios, fucking hell, mushmouth, Atomic Monster, The Saffron Company, and Max Origins, and was being developed for release via streaming exclusively for Warner Brothers Discovery Max. Ooh, oif but boif. So that brings us to the end of another Ministry O Horror. I do appreciate y'all joining me on this little journey, and I hope you'll stick around for the next show, which will be from the new HQ of Ministry of Horror. Now, if you are watching live on Twitch, stick around. We are going to do a watch party. We're going to look for a film. There's been a few interesting looking films added to Prime recently. Makes a change. Not saying they're going to be good. I don't know. But it's going to be interesting to actually have something something to watch, I should say. I'm not going to say worth watching. If you've been watching on Twitch, please give a follow. Way too loud. I've not leveled that up well, apologies. Please give the show a follow, all that good stuff. If you're listening to this on podcast platforms, please give the show a follow or a subscribe, whatever it is that you use. I will try and put this onto YouTube. I think I put the last few onto YouTube. If you don't have Twitch, then you can check it out. Just search Ministry of Horror. I think that's kind of all of the homework bookkeeping, but thank you for watching Ghouls and Fiends. I will catch you next time. If you want to if you're going to join the watch party, then stick around.